Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swirsky's Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swirsky's Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swirsky's Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swirsky Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swirsky Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts Alex and Sean. On this episode, we have the Bears robbed in New Orleans, big shakeup with the Chicago Cubs, and the Blackhawks streaking in the wrong direction. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. The season has started, so you can head on over to icehogs.com, check out the schedule. Please make sure you check out some games because the BMO Harris Bank Center is an awesome place to see hockey. The Rockford Ice Hogs do a great job of making this a very fan-friendly experience. Doesn't break your wallet. So head on over to icehogs.com, get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swirsky Sports sent you. All right, Alex. If it's all fine with you, I would actually like to start with the Bears.
Yeah, that's fine.
And actually, first is typically when we get like feedback from listeners, it's oh, great show, or correct a thing here or there, or they have a question, or they want something discussed. But we have a guy who apparently listens that's not a big fan of us and only listens for Bears content. So he was very, very upset that we thought that the wide receivers were not getting open. And he was informing us that if you watch the All 22, that you'll see that they're open. And I don't have access to the coach's tape, and I don't know if you do. I think NFL has a package where you can see more camera views online, but I don't have that. But I first want to address this. I went to Pro Football Focus, who grades players of every position, and I'm just going to read their grades for the Bears wide receivers to maybe put this into perspective. Kendall Wright, average. Tanner Gentry, poor. Marcus Wheaton, poor. Trey McBride, poor. Josh Bellamy, poor. I mean, I get that every once in a while these guys are going to be open, but I specifically was watching as closely as possible today for this, and there was not a lot of times where a guy was open and he was getting the ball or not getting the ball, unless it was a situation where our two awful tackles were giving up pressure from both sides of the ends. So I'm not sure what this guy wants, but the Bears don't have a good wide receiver core. Does that mean that the game planning by Dow Loggins and John Fox is good? No. Does that mean that Mitchell Trubisky is bad? No. It just means the wide receiver core is not very good. They don't consistently get open, and the timing is specifically not there. I believe it was I can't remember if it was Kendall Wright or Trey McBride on that last interception, is you saw a wide receiver that didn't turn and look when the ball was coming, and it ended up being an interception, which ultimately, sealed the Bears' fate on that final drive. The timing is not there. There's not a lot of separation when the ball's thrown to them. They don't have the athleticism to be able to win these 50-50 battles like some of the big name receivers in the NFL, like the Des Bryants and the Odell Beckham Jr.'s. I don't know what you want. This is not a great core of receivers. Is it an indictment on those guys? No, because none of them should have been number one receivers. It's not like they were all signed to big money and they're terrible. These were supposed to be guys that didn't make the roster. These were supposed to be guys that were, fourth, fifth options and special teams guys, but instead they're called into battle to be number ones and number twos.
Well, I mean, we even saw in the Fox broadcast today how they were saying, look, nobody's open downfield. He's got to throw it away. They said that multiple times. They showed it on the replay. He's like, here, covered, here, covered, here, covered. They weren't open a lot of the times. Were there a few times in this game where some guys were open and Mitch didn't get it to them? Yeah, there were a few times, but a lot of the times they pointed out that just the targets were simply not open. And that makes everything a lot more difficult. And we knew that losing Cam Meredith was a big, big loss because, going into the season, into the preseason, we knew the depth of the wide receiver core was not much at all. So when Cam Meredith went down, that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big trickle effect because Cam Meredith was supposed to be our number one wide receiver, which, if he's playing well, is going to make Kevin White look better because Kevin White then is your number two. And then, either Marcus Wheaton or Kendall Wright is your number three, and the other is your number four. And, suddenly guys that now are your number one receiver, they're your third, fourth option. Makes your receiver core a little better. It gives you more options. But are there things that Dow Loggins, play schematics, play calling, plan design, game plan, all these things that they could be doing to help their wide receivers get open, that's a fault of the offensive game planning and not having the best offensive minds on your team. But it also doesn't help that you don't have the most talented guys. I mean, think about Tanner Gentry. He's a guy getting a boatload of snaps on the offensive side, and he was cut by the Bears twice, and nobody went through waivers, so nobody picked him up.
Yeah.
Every single other team said, nah, we're good. We don't want him on our active roster.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's how it is. And they made the trade, which I thought was a good one, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit, but he wasn't playing today, so it was still a pretty depleted core of targets, not to mention that, we lost our most reliable tight end to a very horrific injury. So, I mean, this is going to be difficult for them going down the stretch. You hope that the new guy, Inman, from the Chargers is going to, help things a little bit, but it's hard to kind of put a lot of pressure on just one guy.
Yeah, so the as Alex was saying, is the Bears made a trade for a conditional 7th-round pick for Dontrell Inman, who is a fairly talented guy. I mean, the Chargers had him inactive, but he was on their active roster, the 53-man, but he hasn't been active the last couple of weeks. And but he immediately becomes a better option than Josh Bellamy. He becomes a better option than Marcus Wheaton. And it makes for, I mean, Kendall Wright has been our best wide receiver before today. Trey McBride had a nice day today, but over the season, Kendall Wright has been our best wide receiver as a whole. And is he a bad option? No, definitely not. But he's a guy who thrives as a slot receiver. He's supposed to be, he shouldn't be getting as many snaps as he is. He's better situationally, and when you have to utilize him to the extent that you do, it's a detriment to Kendall Wright. It's a detriment to your offense. Is hopefully now that you see Trey McBride start to separate himself a little bit, and Dontrell Inman can be the other outside receiver, and then you can use Kendall Wright where he's supposed to be as a slot receiver, and hopefully that at least gives you somewhat competent wide receiver play for the rest of the year. We see that Mitch Trubisky has some talent, but he needs receivers to catch the ball, and he needs an offensive line to give him some time.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a growing pain that we're going to be experiencing through the rest of the season. Because when you look at today's game offensively, you can't point fingers at just one factor. Everything factored into it. I thought Trubisky made some really good throws. I also thought there were times where he overthrew his man and he wasn't as accurate as you hoped. There was the problem with the wide receivers not getting open or really running effective routes. There was the play calling that didn't work well at times. There was the blocking that didn't work well at times. There was, just a little bit of everything. Unfortunately, people can just look at the raw numbers at Trubisky and say, oh, he wasn't good, but that's not necessarily the case. Was he great today? I don't know about that. There were some times, like I said, he wasn't as accurate as we hoped, but I thought the way he played was better deserving of what the numbers show.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be harsh on the guy, but he's a guy who didn't get starter reps in training camp, and he didn't get starter reps for how many weeks during the beginning of the season. He had minimal starts in college, and he's coming in here young. He's a young rookie, and so he's shown some real flashes that I get me pretty excited. But they're gonna have to put a better team around him. I mean, just think Dak Prescott his rookie year. You were like, oh man, look what this guy's doing. But it was behind the Cowboys, who had one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in football. And you had, an awesome running back, and you had Des Bryant to throw to. Makes it that much easier. Does it mean that if you put everything around him that Mitch Trubisky is going to be Tom Brady? That's a stretch, because Tom Brady is arguably the best quarterback ever. But I mean, you are seeing some really competent throws. You're seeing him read the offense and read the progressions. He's got some nice touch on some deep throws, and he looks comfortable out there. So I don't know what more people want is. I mean, you saw some awesome things from Deshaun Watson, but Deshaun Watson started most of the season, and we've seen some recent struggles with him too, and we saw recent struggles at the beginning of it. He had a nice couple games in between, but we're hoping that we see that with Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that we have to put things in perspective a little bit, because football is a team sport, and there's a lot of factors that go into everything that we've watched, and we want to see Mitchell Trubisky be great because, he's supposed to be the big future guy. I get that. I know it's frustrating that the offense isn't playing well, but this is one thing that we're really going to have to be patient with, because you know what? Not all great quarterbacks, hit the ground running right away when they get into the league, and that's for a number of reasons. Some quarterbacks need time to adjust in the league. Some quarterbacks don't have a lot around them or don't have the right coaching, but eventually things can come around, and that's why people can't really throw Mitch away or just kind of be too harsh on him right now. Obviously, it's fine to identify things that he needs to get better with, but that's why he's playing. That's why we're doing this. He's learning through experience. That's the whole point. So that's why we got to be patient with this.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears right now are 3-5, going into the bye week, and honestly, is go back and listen to what a lot of people expected from the Bears, and that's what they thought they would have on the season is 3 wins. And not only do they have 3 wins already, but they've been very competitive in a lot of games. I mean, we'll get a little more into it today, but there was all kinds of opportunities for them to win today. They
there
They
were.
should have won against Atlanta. There's been games that they could have won, and this being 3-5, and then going into this, what should be the easier part of the season, suddenly, I'm not talking playoffs or anything, but you're looking at a respectable season.
It just puts in perspective that this Bears team is showing vast improvement. This defense continues to do great things, and that there is a lot of promise in many different areas of this team. But, when you don't win those close games, it goes to show you're not quite good enough, and we know where a lot of the weaknesses on this team is, but at least you have the luxury of knowing that there is vast improvements, and it's consistently improving.
Yeah, absolutely. And Olin Kreutz made a good point today after the game is he was talking about when he played and the offense was not where it needed to be with Jay Cutler. And he's like, look where the money was. He's like, the coaching money was on the defensive side of the ball. The player money was on the defensive side of the ball. And it's true. Is look at who's getting paid. Pernell McPhee is getting paid. Akeem Hicks is getting paid. You got money on the defensive side of the ball. So, and your most experienced and your best coaches on the team are defensive coaches. And it's showing is you're getting better performance on the defensive side of the ball. On the offensive side is you've got an inexperienced offensive coordinator, a first-time quarterbacks coach. You've got a rookie quarterback, a defensive-minded head coach. It's something that the Bears either have to get better quick and on the fly, or it's going to be something where they're going to have to make the decision to upgrade the offensive coaching staff and definitely start putting more money, because this team does have money to spend, and put it next year towards the offensive side of the ball and adding weapons for Mitchell Trubisky and better protection.
Yeah, exactly. And even though I think we're pretty, I wouldn't say, I don't know if satisfied is the right word, but at least happy that they're competitive through the first, how many games. Because, we want them to win as many games as possible. And there have been some frustrating losses, including today. But, a lot of people were looking at this stretch before the bye week and said the Bears may be lucky to win one game. And they've won 3 and could have won 5. So I think there is a big difference and something to be said there than what a lot of people were saying at the beginning of the year, which, is good news considering what the Bears are expected to do this year. But I think that it is a sign that next year has got to be a contending year. They got to be going for it next year for sure. Now, I'm not going to get really into next year, but, my point is, through these really tough games, we've seen a number of good things, and hopefully when the season gets a little easier, we'll kind of see even more development, kind of like we were talking about last week.
Yeah, we're going to have to. We're going to absolutely have to. But it is nice, and we're going to have to look at the positives here. Glass half full is a lot of Ryan Pace's draft picks have been showing up. Even the rookie class this year is you got Mitchell Trubisky, you've got Tariq Cohen, you've got Eddie Jackson, you've got these players that are starting to step up. Even Tanner Gentry was an undrafted rookie, and he's playing significant time. So adding another fairly high draft pick and then having the offseason where you're going to actually go out and spend money. And you have to think about this. Is the Bears have had some tough breaks this year. They've had with injuries and some officiating and some just tough losses. And after everything, this team still comes out and plays hard. And this is a fun type of team to want to play for. Is these guys are fired up. And it's funny for me because I'm in the the camp of getting rid of John Fox and in favor of somebody more offensive minded to help
Me too.
groom this offensive, weapon that you have at quarterback that you finally have. But the team plays hard for him. They don't quit on him. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and you know what? I think I'm going to go back to it again, as I think we'll hopefully continue to see this. The defense, it just they really bring an energy, and like you said, the whole team is fired up and they play hard, top to bottom. But boy, this defense, they go to play every single drive, and other than that opening drive in today's game where you had some slips and bad penalties, they play hard, and they try not to make a lot of stupid mistakes. Obviously, the stupid mistakes we do see every now and then are like bad penalties or a slip here or there, but they really grind down and bear down. It's something we've been wanting to see for a few years now, because let's face it, you didn't see that in the Trestman era. Even in the beginning of the Fox era, the Bears defense really didn't have much, but now that we have some talent and we have kind of the right attitude, you're seeing some big results there.
Yeah, the biggest factor for me was just having an experienced quarterback like Drew Brees and having their offensive system in place and having a really good offensive mind like Sean Payton. They took advantage of the Bears having some inexperienced guys, not all their starters, and they really utilized that screen pass and some of the stretch run plays to really, weaken the Bears. Instead of the Bears being able to run downhill and hit, they had the Bears chasing a lot. And then once they got the Bears to anticipate those plays, then they started to go back the other way and go downfield a little more. And that really was the differences. So the Bears, the screen plays and reacting to the screen plays and some of those, some of the run plays where they just weren't stuffing it. They were giving up 5-6 yards a clip. That was ultimately the big difference. But, Drew Brees did not throw a touchdown pass in this game.
And they won their first game without Brees throwing a touchdown pass since 2009.
Yeah, so this is something that, you've got to hang your hat on. You've got to hang your hat on the fact that you contained Drew Brees. You made it very uncomfortable for him in the pocket. You played very well, and you held them to a point total that nobody was expecting. Even the people that thought the Bears had a chance to win, they thought it was going to be
a shootout.
It was somewhat of a shootout, and the Bears scoring a lot of points. And I don't think anybody expected this low of a score total by the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, especially since, the way the game started, but they really adjusted quickly.
Yeah. So, on the offensive side, I think after last week, maybe even the week before, we're wondering, where's Adam Shaheen? We'd hyped him up as this red zone target. He was going to be a good weapon and baby Gronk and blah, blah, blah. And we were like, where are we seeing him? Why aren't we seeing him in the red zone? And we did today. At least we saw him in the red zone. I thought on the one play it was thrown over his head where they had to end up kicking a field goal. But if you go back and watch at a different angle, I don't know how that's not, a penalty on the defense, because the guy that was covering him was just basically pushing him all well past 5 yards. It should have been illegal contact, but it was not called, which is the theme of today, is poor officiating. But at least you saw him out there, and you saw Mitch Trubisky looking for him.
Yeah.
But Shaheen's got to be against a guy much smaller than him. He's got to be much more physical at the point of attack. something we got to see if he's.
And you're going to need more of him probably because that injury to Zach Miller did not look good.
Yeah, that was another really promising play is Zach Miller catching a touchdown pass. And I don't care what that official said. That's a touchdown. Dean Blandino called it a touchdown. And this is a huge, huge problem with the NFL is if they can't follow their own rules and they can't even identify what's a catch and what's not a catch, is you really frustrate the fans. Is everybody and their mother was just like, how is that not a touchdown? Sure, the guy set the ball down, after he landed, but he clearly was injured. It was not like he dropped it. He set it down. On no planet can I figure out how that's not a touchdown. And I have a feeling that on Tuesday the NFL when they issue their we botched that one letters, they're going to send one to the Bears saying that was a blown call and that should have been a touchdown, and it's going to not really matter, just like it doesn't for any of the other ones because they don't go back and change scores. But it was despicable that they didn't call that a touchdown. And it's funny because earlier in the game, they overturned what was called a fumble on the field by the Saints. Now, was it a fumble? Probably not. But they called it a fumble on the field. And if the rule states that when it goes to replay, they have to have conclusive evidence that it was the other way around. Otherwise, the call has to stand. And on no camera angle that they could show did they show the knee going to the ground. It was cut off. There's no clear view. So how do they overturn that? But then they don't call this a touchdown for Zach Miller. It's infuriating. It's really infuriating. I just don't understand the refereeing. I get they're human, but that's what the replay should get things right, not get it wrong.
I am absolutely dumbfounded by that call on Zach Miller. I was speechless when it happened. I wrote about it too for Blasting News, and I said, look, nobody was arguing on the side of the refs here. Every writer, analyst, fan, journalist, you name it, was going, what on earth? I mean, I can't put it into words. It didn't. What told me that wasn't a touchdown? I still can't explain it now, hours later after it happened. I mean, it's crazy. I'm still in shock by it.
I have somebody I know that's a Saints fan from New Orleans, and he texted me and went, I feel like I owe you a beer after that one.
Yeah.
He knew he was going to take it, but he knew that it was a touchdown. So
every Saints fan on Twitter I know thought it was a touchdown.
Yeah. I mean, the officiating was just very poor. Even that 54-yard pass that got caught by the Saints when they was on double coverage with Kyle Fuller and Eddie Jackson. There was a push-off on that. And it was clear as day there was a push-off. On one of the last Bears drive when they got down, towards the end zone, there was a helmet-to-helmet on Mitch Trubisky that was clearly missed, which there's supposed to be somebody standing there watching for this, and they miss it. It was just, this was terrible officiating, just absolute garbage.
Yeah, it really was. There were several moments where it was just a clear missing of what was right, whether it was that overturn or, there's a lot of things that went against the Bears, and that's why I just thought it was funny how crazy the Saints were going with that what was it, a face mask that was called that probably shouldn't have been called towards the end.
Yeah.
When they scored their touchdown. And I'm just thinking, you had so much go right for you. Like, this is somewhat of a makeup call.
Yeah, it was just abysmal. And how many times did Leonard Floyd get held and it wasn't called? It was.
Yeah.
I just was throwing my hands up. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's hard to not think that the officials, well, we're told to make sure that the Saints won this. I mean, I'm not saying that, but if somebody told me that was the case, I would be hard pressed to find an argument against it.
It's like, you miss a holding call here, you get a face mask call there, stuff like that happens because they just miss. But I don't see how in any way you can just justify that overturning of that call in the end zone. That right there is so bad that's going to have people talking about that for a while.
I mean, that's replacement ref bad.
Yeah, it is.
And usually, I mean, you can go back and pull tapes on this. Is typically I'll talk about how, if there's bad officiating, I'll be like, hey, it was bad officiating, but there was bad on both sides. The other team had this call missed that should have been, the Bears benefited. I'll point it out, but it was hard to not find, 9 out of 10 blown calls were against the Bears, where, in the Saints' favor. It was just infuriating.
Yeah, it really was. And again, I'm not trying to blame the refs on the Bears' loss, because there were a number of things the Bears did not accomplish that, they could have accomplished to win this game. But boy, I thought that non-touchdown, I thought that kind of swung things a little bit. Like I said, it's not fully to blame, but it did swing things a little bit.
Yeah, and going back to the offense a little bit, there was a play that really stuck in my craw, and it was a comeback pattern. Tanner Gentry was running, and basically he was supposed to run straight out hard and then turn and come back. And the philosophy is that you drive the cornerback off his back pedal, and he has to turn his hips, and then you create separation by coming back because he has to turn his hips again and come towards you. And Tanner Gentry, he ran out. He didn't run hard enough to make the cornerback, Crowley, didn't make him run hard enough to turn his hips, and then was slow on his stop and turning around and coming back. And so Crowley jumped right on that and nearly picked off a play, and a pass by Trubisky that ended up being incomplete. And it's frustrating because you're like, well, that's the reason we need, professional wide receivers. Maybe Tanner Gentry gets to be a quality number 3 or 4 later in his career, but that's sort of why you need better weapons, especially for a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something. Yeah, so that's why I think looking forward, we have to see what Inman can do here, because I think he may help a little bit, make some plays downfield, have a target downfield for Mitchell Trubisky, and that may make somewhat of a difference going forward, having another weapon there. But I don't think it's going to be anytime this year where we're going to see a huge, huge difference in the dynamic of the offense, because it's hard to add multiple reliable targets when, there isn't much. You can't just go to a store and pick up like another Des Bryant or someone good like that. But, like I said earlier, there's going to be growing pains like this, especially when we're suffering more injuries, and, I hate to say it, but when you see the reffing continue to be kind of bad in these big situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the offensive end, we talked about some of the positives. It was nice to see Trubisky be able to run the ball a little bit when there was no, not being antsy in the pocket, but when he saw an opportunity, really took it. We saw the offensive line in the first 3 quarters of the game blocked pretty well for the run. You saw some great runs by Jordan Howard. And you saw some nice plays by Trey McBride. But ultimately, I thought the play calling was pretty bad. especially when it got down to important third and ones and fourth and ones, is you saw a wide open lane up the middle. Is why didn't you take advantage of it? You're not going to be comfortable enough to make a Jordan Howard run for 1 yard. Is go from a shotgun, and when the pocket starts to collapse a little bit, is let Trubisky step up in the pocket and run for that 1 yard. He's gonna get it. They weren't getting pressure straight up the gut. They were getting pressure from the corners, from the outside. So you saw, some pretty nice runs straight up the gut, and picking up 1 yard. It's easy enough with that kind of play calling. That was frustrating. I felt like they didn't run enough good routes or call enough good routes for the Bears wide receivers to be able to create some sort of natural legal picks and things to get the guys open. I didn't think they had enough, or they didn't have any gadget plays really that could spark the offense a little bit. And they're if they're not getting protection for Trubisky from just having the tackles there, is you need to be able to identify where that pressure is coming from and chip, multiple tight end sets. You've got, before the Miller injury, you have how many tight ends on this roster? Is utilize some of them. So I thought the play calling was spotty, and I didn't necessarily like the game plan going into this game. So that was frustrating. I think that was my biggest frustration with the offense.
Yeah, especially late in the game when it was 3rd and 1 and then 4th and 1 and 3rd and 1, they tried to throw like that fade pass, and it was broken up when, that's when you should have run the ball because it was the 3rd and 1. And there was a lot of times when we saw the same run first down, lose yards, run on 2nd down, maybe gain a yard, then quick pass on 3rd down. It was just some of that same reoccurring stuff that was really predictable from the get-go. It was frustrating to see that, especially, and I was pretty pissed when they didn't convert on that 4th down. Just very, very bad play calling, but, what are you going to do?
Yeah. But the defensive side of the ball, there was definitely some good things, creating turnovers. Drew Brees isn't known for throwing a lot of interceptions, but at least you were able to create fumbles, and then that's important. They're gonna they faced a very good Saints team today. They caught at the right moment. That's really hot, and they did what they needed to do. So against lesser opponents like Cleveland and San Francisco and the like, that continuing to build this atmosphere where you're going to cause turnovers and you're going to look to capitalize on them is going to be huge. It's going to, that doing things like that is definitely going to notch you a victory against Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, they should beat the Browns. Hopefully they beat the Browns. If they don't beat the Browns, then they should honestly quit this entire season. But yeah, it'll be kind of nice when the games are against not as tough opponents. This team is working really hard, whether they're winning or not, and it's got to be exhausting for them, especially for the defense that has to stay on the field so much. It's they need kind of relief. They got a bye week coming up, so that's good. And then when you have some of these easier opponents, it gives a little more room for error and a little more room, I think, to try to work things out with your quarterback, with some of your offensive schemes and your play calling, because there was not a lot of room for error in most of these games because you were playing such good teams.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the bye week is coming up this week, so the Bears have a week off this week before they play the Green Bay Packers, the Aaron Rodgers-less Green Bay Packers. So the Bears have a whole extra week, and what are you hoping that they accomplish with this bye week to better the team?
Yeah, it's for me. I think I would say it's first of all getting rest. That's the biggest thing. This defense has worked hard and needed rest. Also, I think it's really a good time to really learn from your mistakes because you have a lot of young guys on this team. You know, when you're a veteran team, obviously you're always looking to adjust, but you got to have a different approach. With a bye week with such a young team, I think it's their time to say, hey, this is working out, this isn't working out. How can we make this better? How can we avoid some of the bad things that are happening? How can we make it easier for Mitchell Trubisky? How can we be more efficient at running routes? How can we be more efficient at blocking? Yeah, I think it's little stuff like that. So I think it's a combination of rest and learning. And that's the key for a young team that hasn't played a lot in the NFL. And with all these tough games, it can wear down on you, and to learn from your mistakes.
For me, I think it's getting the timing routes, timing issues on routes corrected between the quarterback and the wide receiver. Especially now that you have Dontrell Inman coming, he's had minimal work with the Bears playbook, so he's got to learn the plays. But he also has to get the timing routes down with Mitch Trubisky, and you saw some of those issues today. Is when you have a quarterback that's used to working with a wide receiver or a group of wide receivers, is you develop this relationship. You know where they're going to be. When it's this play, you know where to throw the ball to a certain spot. And you just don't have that rapport with Mitch Trubisky and any of these wide receivers because he's still learning everything and learning how to be an NFL player. And a lot of these are not experienced wide receivers either. So and not only are they not experienced wide receivers, so they're not going to run consistent routes, but also they don't have the timing down with Trubisky. So you hope that with another week that you can focus on some of these errors and things and then be able to be more productive in the second half with your offense.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I really look forward to in the second half after this bye week is just seeing how the offense can maybe shake things up a little bit. I don't know exactly if they're going to go drastically different at times because they don't have much to throw to, but I want to see some changes. I want to see a bit more chance taking, and I'm hoping that this bye week kind of lets them figure out, okay, where would be a good place and a good time and with what people to kind of change things up a bit. Maybe take more chances throwing here or using Inman now that you got him, or maybe you try more bootlegs. I just want to see more variation and trying more things in the second half. I just think that's really important going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess we can wrap the Bears talk up with some of the injuries. We had Kyle Long that had a finger injury. Cody Whitehair, I think it was an elbow injury, I think they said. And then the most significant one is Zach Miller's knee injury, which I'm hearing an early report is dislocated knee with 2, maybe 3 tendon tears. And a year and a half at least out.
I mean, that could be career ending right there.
I have a feeling this is done. I think this is his career.
Oh my God.
I can't imagine him coming back, because he's not the young guy anymore, and he's gonna miss the rest of the season. Plus, if the reports are correct, all of next season. That's a long time to be away from the game and come back.
Especially at his age. It's not like he's a spring chicken in football terms.
And which sort of sucks because he's a very talented guy, and he's a great presence on the team, and just seems like a great guy. I'd love to have him as a Chicago Bear. This is, heartbreaking news because of such a injury-marred career.
Yeah, I was writing about his injury earlier, and at that point I'd only heard about the dislocated knee. And when you hear dislocated knee, you say, well, what's the severity? Because I had a very minor dislocation of the knee where it just kind of, it was like a sprain. It just tore some of the muscle around my knee, but it didn't do any ligament damage. So obviously what I wrote about was it's going to depend on the severity of the dislocation, because it could either be not as bad as you think, or it could be incredibly serious. So now that you're hearing this, I think that goes to show how serious it is. I haven't really looked it up lately. Have you heard that from beat writers, or who exactly did you hear that from?
I just got a text that it just said the reports are
Okay.
from a friend of mine.
Okay, yeah.
So-
Man.
I don't know where that's coming from yet, but that's not good.
Here's the thing, that wouldn't surprise me, because you saw the way that leg turned.
I saw it. It was very Gordon Hayward-ish.
Yes.
I saw it, and I was at my buddy's house, and our kids were playing, and he was wrangling his kid, and I saw it, and I went, oh, and he was like, and he just looked up for a second. He's like, touchdown, and I was like, don't watch the replay. Don't watch the replay. And he's like,
Yeah.
what? And he watched the replay and went, oh, why did I watch the replay?
They even didn't replay it close up again. They said they wouldn't because of it.
Yeah, and well, because he rewound it and to watch what happened, and he was just like, "Oh my god, that was terrible." I feel for the guy, and I hope he does make a recovery, but that just did not look good at all.
You know, I always kind of say, don't play Twitter doctor, but I don't see in any way how that could have not ended up bad. I mean, there's some things you can just tell. Like, obviously you can't make a diagnosis of term, but you can tell that it was bad.
Yeah, if I throw up in my mouth while I'm watching the injury, it's probably not a good one.
Yeah, big time. And it's, I just hate seeing it, because this is the second year in a row where we've lost Zach Miller to season-ending injury. I mean, obviously nothing's official yet, but I can't see him, no matter what the severity, playing again this year, or at least anytime soon. It's too bad he's got talent, but just the injury bug, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
All ending in a just horrible call, too. Just insult to injury.
Yeah, that's just the kicker. Just the salt on the wound. So we got two more topics here. Blackhawks and Cubs. Which would you rather talk about next?
I kind of want to talk about the Hawks, because I think there's a lot to talk about there, and some things that are getting a little controversial. So that's something I was really kind of waiting to talk about tonight.
So you want to wait on the Hawks or start on the Hawks?
We could go into the Hawks.
All right. Yeah, so this week, not too many games, but not very many good results either. Is the first game against the Golden Knights. And it's funny, I really didn't follow the Knights at all. Not my conference, different coast. So I don't really watch a lot of games, except if they're the Hawks playing against them. And I had no idea that they were playing as well as they are. So that record was a little surprising. But you started to see why is, the Knights outskated the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks had trouble getting passes out of their own zone. They struggled with how clogged up the center ice was. The Knights took a lot of shots. The Blackhawks allowed a lot of shots. You can't rely on Corey Crawford to do everything for you. You got to be able to give them a little help up front, and they just give up so many shots. The power play,
Abysmal. Abysmal. That is the worst part.
And you played against their emergency goalie.
I watched the past two Chicago Wolves games that guy was part of. I mean, he wasn't starting, but he was on the bench. And you go from the AHL to the NHL like that, You would think you could do a little better, but yeah, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, so it was just really a frustrating game. I don't even know how to sugarcoat it. It's the Blackhawks not playing well. I mean, that fourth line, brought you a lot of energy. The Bomo, Wingles, Hayden line brought you a lot of energy. You got a shorthanded goal from Hayden, but the Hawks just didn't look good, and that Sharp, Anisimov, DeBrincat line is just non-existent.
They're getting tossed around. Teams are knocking them off the puck and taking it away, and they're not giving them a chance to drive. They're basically creating a cement wall to get into the zone, and then that cement wall hits you and knocks you off the puck. That's kind of what it's been.
Yeah, and when the Blackhawks do get shots, it's like a one-timer, and then the offensive set is done, and it goes right back to their defensive zone where, the other teams are setting up and getting a lot of shots. And, the speed that they exhibited in those first couple weeks of games has really slowed down, is because there's a lot of chasing. There's a lot of poor passes. They look a little flat. I don't know what's going on with the Hawks, but it was that Knights game was not a pretty one.
The Knights game was awful to watch. The Predators game was frustrating. Now, keep in mind, the Hawks may have had 40 shots on Rinne, but how many of those shots were just like from the blue line, uncontested, just right at him?
Yeah, Pekka Rinne just put up his glove and watched the puck go in because he had a clear sight line for the shot.
Where are the people in front of the net? Why was nobody getting in front of the net? Why weren't people moving around?
Yeah. In his last 175 shots the Blackhawks have taken on Pekka Rinne, only 7 have gone in.
Yeah. And I mean, Pekka Rinne is a good goaltender, but they're not, it's the same. He knows what's coming.
Yeah, they're not giving him anything hard to risers or any deflections, anything like that. You're not clogging his vision. It's just easy for him. You're just giving him easy stuff.
Exactly.
And the power play was abysmal.
Yeah, it was.
0 for 6.
Awful. Nothing changes. It's the same thing we see every year. It's the same issues. There's nothing. It's not like every power play they go and they're having all this great pressure, and I mean it's the same thing, same pattern. They're scoring more shorthanded goals than normal goals or power play goals, it seems like. And that's another thing too. They have to lead the league in penalties. They have to.
They're taking a lot of penalties. But I'll look it up real quick. But one thing that just pissed me off in that Nashville game is Craig Smith may as well have set up a campsite right in front of Corey Crawford all night, because he just was there all the time. Yep. It was infuriating, and I just wish somebody would have just cleaned his clock and made him think twice about being there, but they didn't.
Exactly. It was rinse and repeat. Same thing. Like you said, camping. That's really the right word to put it. And boy, that Keith turnover to lead to that goal, that was very un-Keith-like.
That was we talk about how bad Seabrook has been this year, but that was bad on his part.
I mean, you don't see. When you see a 2-time Norris Trophy winner do that really makes you scratch your head. And of course, I don't think we have to explain why last night's game was horrific. That was really a breaking point for me. And I don't think we really have to talk about what went wrong in last night's game. I mean, that was ugly from start to finish. Everything that we've seen go wrong so far. Really went wrong last night. And once again, you got beat by a much inferior team in Colorado that has seemed to just be a thorn in the Hawks' side for many years. But to lose that badly, they look completely out of whack.
Yeah, that game against Avalanche was just it was bad on every level. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I was miserable watching that game. Normally, even when they lose, I enjoy watching games. That I got disgusted and turned it off.
I turned it off after the first period. After the first period, I was done.
So the Blackhawks actually, penalty statistics, if you go by penalty minutes per game, they're 14th.
I want to know penalties taken. Can we find that? Because a lot of the penalties they take are minors, so I just feel like they're getting in the box way more than they normally do.
I feel like they're getting a lot of double minors.
Well, there was one yesterday.
Yeah, and they scored with like 1.9 seconds left in the period. Ugh. And you have the Blackhawks. They switch the lines, which, like, I know everybody looks at Joel Quenneville and they're like, oh, this guy's going to switch the lines and it's going to be magic. Everything's going to be golden and unicorn farts. And working on a line is you want to be able to some consistency because you know where guys are, how they like to get passes, and you just build this rapport with guys. And when you just start switching things around willy-nilly, and you don't just switch one guy or two guys, is they switch somebody from every single line. So DeBrincat went from the third line to the first line, and Panic went from the first line to the second line, and Hayden went from the fourth to the third, and Hartman went from the second to the fourth. So every single line changed, and you saw no benefit. In fact, I think things might have gotten worse.
Yeah, I don't think it really helped much. And I thought when they changed the lines, I thought, okay, seeing, things a little shaken up, maybe things will work out. And so far, we really haven't. I have a question. I can't remember just because I was so disgusted with the game. Was Connor Murphy scratched last night? Because I didn't see him.
I thought he played, but I only watched the first period. Let me see.
Right, that's why I have to ask.
Maybe I can't remember if I was confusing the Nashville game or this game, but I remember he did something dumb that made me really annoyed. Must have been Nash. No, he played last night.
Did he?
He was on the third pairing with Michael Kempney.
Okay, I mean, I barely remember who played and who didn't last night. I just remember Forsberg getting pulled. I think it was either Wingles or Hartman on a breakaway, shorthanded, hit the post, rang off. Colorado got it back and immediately scored. Yeah,
that was the point where I was watching the game in bed on my iPad, and it took me all self-control to not fling it across the room.
I know. I slammed my fist on the ottoman.
And it's funny because my wife was watching the game with me, and she loves hockey, but she's a Flyers fan. She's from Philadelphia. So she was asking me, she's like, of the new players, she's like, who do you like? And she's like, or the young players. And I was like, well, he's not that young, but I really like Jan Ruda. And it, like, the words barely got off my lips, and he just does a boneheaded play. He gives up a turnover in the defensive zone, and I'm like, you know what? I really like the other team's goalie. That's who I like. Maybe then he'll start making mistakes.
Yeah, yeah, that was I've liked Jan Ruda for the most part, but he's had a couple rough ones lately. It's so funny how at the beginning of the season we were like, oh boy, things look like they're back, and that's kind of probably a little bit of our excitement getting the best of us, because the first two games, they looked like that hungry animal we saw a few years ago. And look, I know teams go through ups and downs, and I know that there are some slumps where teams play badly, but the problem is a lot of these struggles are bad trends that we've seen getting worse and worse the past 2 years. So it's not like, well, things aren't just bouncing their way, they'll come back. It's just things do not look like they're taking a big improvement lately. Things look like they're kind of going back to the getting outskated, not making the smartest of plays. And they did that a lot last year, but Corey Crawford and Scott Darling bailed them out time after time last year, where this year, a lot of those mistakes they're paying for, and the big payment for those mistakes kind of started greatly in the playoffs, and, well, I just missed that team that the first week that looked really energized, because I'm not seeing it lately.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of people have sort of figured out the recipe to beat the Blackhawks, and it's not like you can just, it's easy to beat the Blackhawks because they're a really good team, but teams know how to do it now. It's not a secret, and you're seeing quality teams be able to do that on a consistent basis. Cough, Nashville, cough. So, and I'm going to try to say this so I don't get meatballs screaming at me and, be called a hater and I should go root another team or whatever. But I honestly think that it might be time for a head coaching change. Quenneville is a absolutely wonderful head coach. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, but maybe it's time to put a new system in place and see how that goes, because the Blackhawks still struggle doing the same things year in and year out for the last several years now.
That whole thing with Quenneville came up yesterday. It seemed like the whole questioning of Quenneville was kind of mellow, but then after last night, I saw a lot more people bring it up. And look, we all know what Quenneville's done, and I think that I'm going to say, let's see how this season plays out. We'll see what happens. If they squeak into the playoffs and they get killed in the first round, then you know what? Maybe it is time. I'm not saying that right now it is time. I think it is time to maybe really start to put a little pressure under Quenneville. He's been having the nice cushy seat since winning 3 cups, as deserved. He's going to be a Hall of Famer, like you said, and he is going to go down as the greatest Blackhawks coach in history, going back to even like Robbie Ray. In terms of Stanley Cup championship wins, he's definitely the best coach, Joel Quenneville. But, like you said, sometimes a change is good, and like I said, I'm not saying fire Quenneville right now. I'm not saying that. If they get hot again and they make another run of the playoffs, then yeah, you're obviously still having success under Quenneville. However, I think it is fair to question his longevity and his lifespan here in Chicago. I think that this is kind of the season to see where the pressure is. If things keep trending this way, then yeah, I think you really do consider a new head coach. So, I'm trying to say this as least meatball-y as I can.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the NHL, is how many coaches get fired that are good coaches and then just move on to another team and do well, is because there's a lifespan, or there's a shelf life on NHL coaches with one team. And you'll see, like Ken Hitchcock, how many times has that guy been fired and come back and resurrected another team? These guys all have a shelf life, And it's not that they're bad. It's not like baseball or football where, you get one, maybe two chances and then you're done. The NHL it's a coaching carousel. Look at how many of the same guys you see, like Peter Laviolette and Hitchcock and Sutter and these guys Quenneville even. Look at how many teams that they've coached.
Colorado, the Blues. Look, wasn't he one of the winningest coaches in Blues history?
Yeah, so you have a shelf life on these guys, and maybe Quenneville's shelf life is up, and then I'm sure he goes to who knows where and resurrects that team and helps make them good, and you bring in another great coach to replace Quenneville, and he shakes things up and you get back on track, because it's not a talent issue right now. It is a coaching philosophy here.
Yeah, I mean, things don't seem to be synced up right now. Things don't seem to be, obviously we don't hear about what happens in locker rooms, so I can't really speak for that, but there's just something really off right now. And look, like I said, if they played like one or two really awful games happen, but going back the past few weeks, they've had awful games, at least 4 or 5 of them, and then, one of those they were able to pull out a win. The game against the Coyotes, where we said they looked pretty good overall, there were times when they even looked pretty sloppy, whether it was the penalties or there were sequences when the Coyotes were kind of all over them. And that's kind of one of those things where you say, well, the Coyotes may not be good, but they have some young, speedy players, and young, speedy players have been kind of besting the Hawks the past year or so, and that's kind of a scary trend. It gets back to that whole thing I was talking about. It's not just that they're not winning, it's that they're showing some signs of bad things that have been happening the past year, and it's coming back again after a few really good games to start where I thought, hey, maybe they put some of those bad things behind them. You're starting to see it come back again. That's the concerning thing.
Yeah, and it's a very frustrating thing. I get you've got some young players, you've got some new faces, and you're gonna see some issues crop up here and there. It's just when the same issues crop up all the time that you get infuriated.
Here is a question I'm going to ask, and again, I'm trying not to be meatball-y here. Let's say the Hawks, by mid-season, are like way out of it. Like, they just keep losing. They just lose and lose and lose, and they're way out of it by mid-season. What do you think happens? What do you think the front office tries to do? Realistically, if you think like Stan Bowman, what do you think would happen?
I think he'll try to trade expiring contracts. And I would not be shocked for him to make a firing mid-season, and promote somebody internally to be an interim coach. But I don't think he's going to do any desperation type things to try to save a season. I think he parts ways. I think there's already enough of a rift between him and Quenneville that he parts ways with him and tries to create a positive from a bad situation by either creating cap room or bringing in some draft picks or young players, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think you hit it pretty well on the head that they wouldn't obviously go into like a big fire sale or a desperation move or anything, but you try to make a few things here or there. And, I think it's not very meatball-y to question Quenneville's future because of the relationship of Bowman and Q. You're not saying, I want him fired because. You're saying, well, knowing those two, you think that maybe it would happen because of the relationship, because of the way things are going. I think it's perfectly okay to question that. I think there's a difference between going out and saying fire this and sell everyone right now in October, but it's, the difference between that and saying, well, this is really tough evaluation time for them and they might have more pressure than we think. I think that's a very fair statement. I think it's probably happening right now. And, like I said, maybe the Hawks pick it up and everything turns out to be okay. Maybe things don't turn out to be okay. Maybe the Hawks are okay but not great, and that kind of justifies keeping things around for front office management. It's really hard to know right now. It's very early in the season. But the overall thing that we're talking about right now is things aren't trending well right now.
Yeah, and if you look at their division, the Central Division, is St. Louis is running away with it, but the Blackhawks are tied with Colorado, Dallas, Nashville for second place. They're not in a bad position by any means, but
it's still very early.
But you don't want to get down on a bunch of teams that like Nashville, Minnesota, Colorado, St. Louis, where you're clearly struggling against them. You just don't want to get far behind them. And then this week you've got they're no cakewalk games. You got the Flyers, Wild, and Montreal.
Yeah, and they're going to have to start beating their division because they've already lost the Wild, they've already lost the Blues, they've won and lost against the Predators, so they're 1-1 there. They lost to Colorado. They've yet to play Dallas, but you're going to have to start beating these division opponents. Because remember in earlier shows I've said, you got to take every point you could get to start the season because things are going to get kind of tough because you're going to play a lot of division games. You're going to play a lot of tight together games where you have, one game one day, one game the next day, and one may be against a division opponent. I mean, we saw the Predators and the Avalanche this weekend, and that was a disaster. So now you're saying, well, the difference right now is going to be these head-to-head matchups, so you got to start winning some of these games.
Yeah, you got to. Every team in the NHL goes through slumps and streaks, but if you're going to be a team that's going to compete for a Stanley Cup, is you can't have you can't string bad losses together like the Blackhawks are doing right now. At least you got to break them up with a nice win or a hard fought victory, and that's just not happening. So you hope that they're going to turn this around by a nice win against Philadelphia on Wednesday.
Yeah, so I'm looking at their calendar and what they've done so far this season. And let's see, first 2 weeks, we were riding pretty high because they took points in every game but one, and that was the loss to the Minnesota Wild 5-2. You look at some of the other games during that. Obviously, 10-1 opener, they dominated. 5-1, they dominated that game. In the Toronto and the Canadiens game, they were outplayed in both of them, but they salvaged 3 of 4 points. That was more good work by Corey Crawford and whatnot. And then in they beat Nashville in overtime, and that was a pretty even game, I thought. Played terribly in St. Louis. Edmonton, Chicago, that game in Chicago, they lost in OT, but I thought that was a game the Hawks played pretty well. The game against the Arizona Coyotes, I thought they played okay. I didn't think they were spectacular. I didn't think they were terrible. And then the last 3, it was a lot of bad in many different respects. So, they got some points early on, and we were happy about that. But, I could only point out maybe 3-4 games so far where they really looked good. And I know I'm totally contradicting what I said early on, but that was after the first 2 games. And the first 2 games, they looked really good. So, things may change in a few games or so, but this is a situation where, like I said, you're seeing a lot of the same problems game after game. Yeah,
I just don't know how in midseason you just start correcting an abysmal power play. When you have this much talent, it's not like, oh, somebody's going to come back and spark this. And I don't know how you correct not being able to enter the zone and maintain puck possession. Those are just fundamental things that are wrong with your team.
Remember when we were talking about early on how crisp the passing was? What happened to that?
I have no idea. And I get, like, there's no super dominant team right now in the NHL. Is if you look at the standings, I mean, I know it's early, but other than a couple teams at the very, very bottom, most everybody's bunched right up together.
Yeah.
There's no dominant team. Every team's got flaws. So, you would hope that this would be a great year to try to bounce back, because it's not like there's some dominant team that it's a juggernaut that's gonna run through everybody. There's going to be a lot of teams that have a wide open chance to win a Stanley Cup this year.
And look, I don't want to be this guy, but Vegas, they're not that good of a team that their record is showing right now. I really don't think they are. I think they're a talented team. They got some talented guys, but they're not that good. I mean, right now, they have to rely on Chicago Wolves goaltending. They're playing with a lot of hype and energy right now, which is good for them, but don't buy into the fact that they're going to be this good all year.
Yeah, I mean, they're a well put together team, and they don't have a lot of holes, but they're playing over their heads as far as what their talent level is. But they are actually a very well put together team, and not a lot of weaknesses. So, I mean, I don't think they're going to bottom out at all, but I don't think they're going to stay as hot as they are.
Right. I'm not saying bottom out. I still think they're going to be very competitive. I don't want to sound like they're just going to start being terrible. I'm just saying that I don't think they're as big of a juggernaut as their record shows. I think that they'll still be competitive throughout, and I give them a lot of credit for that because they got a lot of good players, but I don't think they're as big of a powerhouse as they show. And, you'll see some times where they hit a wall, but like you said, there aren't a lot of huge powerhouses right now.
No, definitely not. Let's see, the league leaders, the teams with the best record right now are the Kings, who they're playing very well, but I mean, they weren't very good last year. Tampa is playing very well, St. Louis, and Vegas. And then you get to that next level of New Jersey, Ottawa, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Toronto. There's those top couple teams are going to come back to earth, and it's going to be who matchups and whose flaws get exposed better, and who can patch up some of their holes, because this is a year of a lot of flawed teams.
Yeah, and, it really is kind of interesting to see who's doing really good right now. Obviously Vegas is one of them, and the Kings are really interesting because they didn't have much last year going for them. But you do take them a bit more seriously because they've been a unit for a while, and you know what they are capable of doing when they are having a good season. But you look at the teams in the Hawks division, and I'd still argue the Predators are the most dangerous one. St. Louis is really good as well, but, I think they'll hit some rough patches as well. I think that Dallas is a solid team. I don't think they're great, but I don't think they're really bad. Obviously, they are a very offensive-based team. Colorado, no matter how good or bad they are, they're just a thorn in the Hawks' side, and the Hawks can't beat them. So the Western Conference, it still should be a conference where the Hawks make the playoffs. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now is I'm not worried about not making the playoffs at this point if things continue maybe, but I still think we're in a pretty good position to make the playoffs. But things do have to get a lot better if they want to make a serious run at this.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's transition over to the last topic. I didn't think there would be much, but here we are. So the Cubs have a lot of coaching changes, and some of them were team choice and some were not. So Davey Martinez out. He's the new head coach of the Washington Nationals, which I think was a fantastic hire on the Nationals' part.
Good for him.
It's gonna,
he deserves it.
Yeah, great for him. He's deserved it for years, and it's finally nice to see him get the opportunity. It's gonna suck for the Cubs. It's Joe's leaned on him pretty hard. Chris Bosio is out, and Jim Hickey is in. John Maley, who we were surprised was not out at that point, and he's out, replaced by Chili Davis. Gary Jones out, replaced by Brian Butterworth.
There has been a lot of negative spinning on all this, and I kind of wanted to get your opinion on it because I think the media has done way too much to try to turn this into a negative when I think there are a lot of positives out of this.
The only one I mean, Gary Jones, I had no bad feelings about like why he was let go. And I don't know anything about his replacement, Brian Butterworth.
I've heard some pretty good things about him. He's gotten a lot of praise from multiple people.
Yeah, so I don't have an opinion on that. But John Maley, there was a lot of hitting issues, and it's always going to fall back on your hitting instructor, hitting coach. And Chili Davis is a guy who I watched growing up. Like that was my heyday was a Chili Davis era, and I loved watching him play. And I think he's done a fantastic job as in his hitting instructing role. So it's nice to see. It's nice to see them bring him over because I think that's going to be a positive. And Chris Bosio, although I think he's not a very pleasant dude per se, I thought he did a very good job in his role. So I didn't know who would replace him, but now that they brought Jim Hickey in, Hickey's a fantastic pitching coach.
And he knows Madden well. Really he gets along with Madden well. Madden likes him.
Yeah, so I'm very positive about that. That could have been a very ugly one, and I'm very positive about it. The last one is Davey Martinez, and that's I wonder who Joe Madden is going to tap for that position. And I know who the media and the fans are clamoring for, but I don't know if that's a realistic option.
I take it you're talking about Girardi, or are you talking about David Ross?
David Ross.
Yeah, one of the two.
I would love to see David Ross in that role, and I think he could do it well. And I think he one day is going to be, if he wants to, managing. And this is a path, on a silver platter, a path to that role. And if he wants it.
What I think would make David Ross good is that everyone just loved him in the clubhouse, and he was a huge, huge factor in that clubhouse during their championship run and in 2015. So he would have the respect and the energy from his players, and I think personality-wise, that would be a really good fit for him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the one thing is I don't think he's a Spanish speaker, which was a great thing that Davey Martinez could speak to players. But I think David Ross would be fantastic in that role, and I just the level of respect that he commands. Guys loved him, but they also respected him. And
right.
Those things aren't always.
They'd listen to him.
Those things aren't always, equal. The same and obtained by the same guys, and so I don't know who they're going to ultimately get, but Joe has to have some options in mind, because you had to expect, for how many years has he expected Davey Martinez to be gone and taking a head coach or manager's role, and so he had to have some sort of backup plans in mind.
Yeah, I think he was well aware of the situation that Martinez was in, and heck, he might have been preparing for an alternative scenario last year too. You never know, because people keep saying over and over, he deserves a chance. He deserves a chance. Well, here's finally his chance, and good for him. So I think Madden has known that for a while, and this is kind of the time for him to say, okay, well, what are our options now? He's got everything else in place. One thing that I did want to also talk about was the new assistant hitting coach who they promoted from their system, and he helped a lot of those kids come up, and a lot of people really liked him. So I think that's another big positive that we have to talk about, because I think, in my opinion, this coaching staff just really improved. And it was good to begin with, but I think it got even better.
Yeah, it definitely improved. I think that was needed. I know there's a lot of anger and frustration with Joe Madden, and a lot of people blaming him for the playoff loss this year. And I think surrounding himself with this year he looked really alone out there.
Yeah.
I mean, is that fair to say that he looked like it was all on him? And I think adding a coaching staff that he's closer to, that he can rely on and lean on more, I think it's going to ultimately make him better. And hopefully there's a lot of people that won't be yes men and will call him on stuff when Joe is clearly not making the right decision.
Right, exactly, because if you have a good relationship with all your other coaches, I mean, that makes your job a whole lot easier. And you look at some of the guys he's hired. Chili Davis, one of the best hitting coaches in the business, someone really respected as his assistant in the organization. Jim Hickey, one of the better guys in the business, knows Joe well. A lot of people thought that maybe he'd try to lure him from Tampa after he went to the Cubs. And, obviously we got to see who's going to be the bench coach. So we can't really make a judgment there. But you look at all the other coaches you have, and you hear so many good things about it. I think I have every right to be excited about this new coaching staff, and I appreciate the heck of what the old one did, but this is baseball. This is a game of constant adjustments. And when you're playing a game of constant adjustments, sometimes you just got to make changes like this. I mean, there were a number of contracts expiring, and people leave because of many, many reasons. I mean, a lot of guys like Martinez and who was the assistant hitting coach that went to the Angels?
Eric
Hinsky. They got bigger job offers, and that's what happens. Though the media is trying to paint this whole, is Madden not getting the respect from his coaches? Is everything not hunky-dory? This, to me, just looks like a process of getting some new, fresh minds and getting guys who Joe Madden wants, because many of the guys on his staff were not his personal hires. Bazio was already here. I think, I don't remember, I think John Maley was a Theo hire, not a Madden bring on. So, this is him getting a staff of who he wants, and some very respected, top-notch guys. I know the media kind of has to, ask a few questions here because that's their job, but I don't think people should see this process as anything negative.
Yeah, I definitely don't. And I just saw that the Phillies are going to hire Gabe Kapler as their head coach. And it's like, you're a lot younger than I am. You haven't experienced this yet, but it's so weird. It's weird to see guys that you grew up watching as head coaches. That's like a weird enough thing. But guys, when you that are not much older than you start being head coaches, like Gabe Kapler is only like 2 years older than me, and he's going to be, the managing the Phillies. It's a weird feeling. It's a really weird feeling, because you're like, I was watching this guy come up when I was an adult. Like, he was coming into the league when I was an adult.
Yeah, I bet. Because, really, the example I could think of that right now is me watching Craig Counsell, and now he's managing the Brewers. There's not many other guys I can really say that I saw play and manage at the same time, while other generations can see they saw countless of these guys play.
So it's Craig Counsell is one, but it's I'm seeing so many. I remember Eric Hinsky playing, Davey Martinez. I remember just playing. There's so many of these guys. I'm like, I remember, and I go back and look at my old baseball cards as a kid, and I'm like, this manager wasn't even on a team when I was still collecting baseball cards. It's just a weird feeling.
Yeah, I'll get there one day. Don't worry.
So I guess what else did I have here in my notes? So Gold Glove nominations came out. I'm sure you have some opinions about this.
Yes.
So Rizzo nominated. So the Gold Glove nominees at first base in the National League is basically a who's who of great players there. It's Votto and Goldschmidt and Rizzo.
No surprises there.
No surprises. Great players. Hayward nominated for Gold Glove and right. No surprise there. Ben Zobrist was nominated at second base.
That was the big surprise that everyone's talking about.
That was the big surprise on the entire thing. Like the fact that Baez was nominated, or Zobrist was nominated and Baez wasn't, and Wilson Contreras wasn't.
Yeah. Wasn't Yadier Molina on that? It was Yadi,
the guy from
Buster
Reds, Buster Posey, and the guy from the Reds.
Zach Cozart, or not Zach Cozart? Zach Cozart.
Was it Cozart? But it's...
or no, Devin Mesoraco. I get those two mixed up. Which one is it?
Let me pull up.
Because I think one's a catcher, one's a shortstop, and I get those mixed up for some reason.
But Buster Posey is not that great of a an option right now, and Yadi Molina is like 4,000 years old. Let's see.
I always said about the Gold Glove, a lot of it's kind of a popularity, big name contest.
Where's this list? That's the 2016 list. Why is the... Let's see, 2017. Oh my goodness, why they keep popping up this 2016 list? All right, here's SB Nation. There we go. Tucker Barnhart.
Oh, Tucker Barnhart. Okay.
Yeah, so it's Buster Posey, Yadier Molina, and Tucker Barnhart. Wilson Contreras is a better defensive catcher than all three of those guys, easily. Yadi Molina, no, not several years ago, but Yadier Molina is like 1 billion years old right now.
Yeah, and he really did not look that good fielding this year. You could tell it's just age catching up to him.
Yeah, and Javier Baez is an absolutely brilliant defensive player, and for him to not be on this list is silly. It's just really silly.
Was the qualifying number of games the right amount of games? That was the one question I had.
I don't know.
Because that's the thing. I think there might be a qualifying game issue.
But honestly, Gold Glove is... how many did Derek Jeter win? And he was not a good defensive player at all.
Yeah, I know.
His range was pretty poor.
His defensive runs saved were like in the negatives.
Yeah, but he made plays when he got to them, but he just didn't get to a lot of them. He was... guys with good bats always get a bump in their defensive stats as far as Gold Gloves go.
Yeah, it's Gold Gloves are not the greatest measure of someone's defensive abilities.
Oh, absolutely not. Not even close. It's is actually a pretty poor one. I mean, how many guys are perennial Gold Glovers that aren't very good?
Yeah, I mean, some deserve it, no doubt, but, it's sometimes you get a Gold Glove and it's kind of like, well, I don't know about that. So, it's fun to look at the awards, but sometimes you take them with kind of a grain of salt because it's like, well, if you look at the stats, really, meh.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking at MLB trade rumors and not much else to talk about other than the Phil Rogers of MLB.com is reporting that the Cubs are willing to listen on big name players in order to acquire young pitchers. He lists Chris Archer, Marcus Stroman, Aaron Nola, and Michael Fulmer as potential targets, noting that only Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, and Wilson Contreras are likely to be considered untouchable.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, I think guys that you would think right off the bat would be available or at least listened to when it comes to trades would be Schwarber, Happ, Russell. I'm kind of surprised Baez isn't on that list, but, I guess he's not as big as Rizzo or Bryant, obviously. But when those kind of names come up in my mind, the first thoughts are always the most likely trade candidates are like a Happ or an Almora or a Schwarber. But that's interesting. I think there's nothing wrong with listening to every offer. That doesn't mean they're looking to trade those guys, but, you got to listen to offers.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much you can listen to any offer. I mean, if you're the Angels, I'm sure you're going to listen to an offer on Mike Trout. It doesn't mean you're going to actually take the offer or even do anything more than listen to it. But this is a league where you never know what somebody's going to offer you. And if somebody's going to offer you some amazing return for one of your players that most people would think is untouchable, you got to consider it. But it's just Rizzo, Contreras, and Bryant are guys that, based on what they're earning and what their return is, it'd be hard to imagine putting a package together that's good enough to make it worthwhile for the Cubs.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The teams that are going to be looking for trades or trying to look for offers with some of these young guys, young pitchers, so to speak, they're not just going to say, oh, throw in one guy 1-for-1. They're going to be asking about multiple guys, most likely, depending on who it is, obviously. But if you're looking for like a big name that's a good pitcher and is still somewhat young, you don't have anything left in the farm to make a big deal. So you have to use your big league assets, and that may mean teams ask about multiple assets, or you ask about one big league asset and any other minor league assets you have. But it's not going to be like a 1-for-1 deal we're going to see here. At least I don't think. That's not going to be the original offers off the bat. They're going to say, what about this guy and what about this guy?
Yeah. So you're going to see, these are always a process, and teams are going to feel out like, oh, is this guy available? And they're going to try to, I'm sure the Cubs are going to ask about untouchable pitchers. Is Noah Syndergaard available? Yeah, but you need to throw in Bryant and Rizzo. All right.
No.
But it's very, very few untouchables, and when you do your due diligence, you're going to hear offers on anybody. You're going to hear every and all offers. You're not going to tell somebody no. You're not even going to bother listening. It's just never going to happen.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of interesting things to think about for this offseason, and that I think may be one of the most stressed out things with fans, because obviously people have really grown attachment with all these young players, and You may have to inevitably tell them that one of them is going to have to be traded to get more starting pitching. So I don't think we're really going to start hearing rumors anytime soon. I think after the GM meetings and the winter meetings is when things are going to start to heat up. So there may be a bit more anticipation than people would think. People kind of wish, hey, let's get the ground running and make a trade right off the bat. I don't think that's going to happen. It's going to take a while for something to go down, and it might have to take a couple months before that. But I think that people just have to be prepared for anything. I mean, I certainly wasn't prepared for the Jose Quintana trade. When I saw that, I was just in shock. So, expect the unexpected with this team. But remember that holes do have to be filled.
Yeah, you need to have a rotation. I would imagine they're going to go after one very good arm and then try to fill that fifth one with somebody else. So you're going to see Hendricks, Lester, Quintana. And they're going to try to get another really solid guy, assuming that Arrieta is gone, and assuming Lackey's gone. And then you're going to try to fill somebody with either farmhands or Mike Montgomery. That's probably what you're gonna look to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Mike Montgomery is someone that they are still probably looking in to make a starter, but you're not going to say, hey, Mike Montgomery, you ready to be our next number 2 or number 3? No, that's probably not going to be the case. They'd be looking at him less of a spot starter and more of a solidified 4 or 5 starter. So you're going to need someone who's proven yet still has enough left in the tank to take the place of something that Jake Arrieta once took, because that's kind of the biggest void you're trying to fill in. Because you still have John Lester, you still have Quintana, you still have Hendricks. Fifth starters, I mean, it's very easy. I shouldn't say easy, but it doesn't take a lot to fill in a fifth starter. Like I said, either do like a Montgomery or you sign someone to a fairly cheap deal. It's going to be filling in that Arrieta void that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swirsky Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening, and please make sure you hit subscribe on however you listen to podcasts, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Share with your friends, and if you want to hit us up on social media, twitter.com, at ShyFanPat1, at Swirsky Sports, Facebook.com/Swirsky Sports, and SwirskySports.com. And thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down, I wanna